Welcome back. This is Steph from Cold-Blooded Freaks, and in today's episode, we are going to go over what we think are the top 5 reptiles for beginner reptile keepers. Let's get to those animals. Before we get to those animals, we're going to talk about the criteria that these reptiles needed to meet in order to be our top 5. One of those criteria is hardiness. Another thing is handleability. So being able to actually hold the animal, to me, is very important, especially as a first-time reptile keeper. I know younger me was constantly holding my first reptiles. The next thing is food items. Food items can make or break a reptile keeper. There's sometimes certain food items that people are very afraid to have in their homes, or even afraid to touch, or just even have to deal with. So we're dealing with some of those food items, and these animals have to meet that criteria as well. The other thing that we're talking about is cage size or enclosure size. Some animals, some reptiles require very large enclosures, very specific heat needs, very specific enclosure setups. So we're talking about some of the more easier animals that are easily kept in smaller enclosures and are very happy in those. We are starting off at number 5. And number 5 for me doesn't quite meet our criteria exactly, but to me, I feel a lot of people think that bearded dragons are a good first time reptile keeping reptile, and I disagree very strongly. I actually feel that Uramastic's, this little girl here is an ornate Uramastic, are better for first time reptile keepers. And the reason why I say that is because their overall care is just easier. Yes, they require high heat. They are from Africa and the Middle East. They do range from anywhere from 10 to 36 inches, but you can get smaller localities, like the ornate Uramastic is quite small. They stay on the smaller side. They're not the smallest Uramastic locality out there, but they do stay pretty small. They do come in some beautiful colorations, and they can live 15 or older years in captivity, so they are certainly a commitment. But they do not eat bugs, so you don't have to worry about having insects in your house. They eat dark leafy greens, and they thrive on heat and leafy greens and a nice enclosure, and that's it. You can handle them. This girl is clearly moving like crazy today because she was nice and warm in her basking spot when I stole her from it. But their faces are absolutely adorable. I think I fell in love with her face the moment I saw her. I just always loved how cute and how robust their little faces are. They look like little dinosaurs to me. They're very neat little spiny tails that they have. And they do very similar behavior like bearded dragons. They run up to things and lick it, which I find to be adorable. But I think that these are better for first-time reptile keepers, though the enclosure does have to be a little bit on the bigger side. You need at least a 10-gallon for a young one, but as they get full grown and mature, you're probably going to be looking at something closer to a 40-gallon breeder for them. And again, with those high heat light bulbs. But no buggies. Moving on to number 4, which for me is colubrids, or specifically corn snakes, which I absolutely love. This one here is a beautiful male palmetto. I think that these guys are absolutely beautiful. They develop more and more spotting, and they're usually very handleable. This guy's a little bit nervous today. He doesn't really want to be famous, I guess. But corn snakes can live in their 20s in captivity, and full grown, I would say, tops is a 40-gallon tank, so not crazy, but they can live a pretty decent amount of their life in a 20-gallon tank if necessary. These guys do top out usually between 3 to 5 feet long, so we're not talking about a crazy long snake. I guess that does sound a little scary to some people, but they're more like long noodles and not so thick and scary of a snake when it comes to the snake world. Colubrids or corn snakes do tend to stay more on the narrow side of the snake spectrum, if you will. They do eat everything from rodents, fish, quail eggs, and even little chicks. With that said, those items would make them not higher on our list because some people don't want to deal with, rodents, whether they're frozen thawed or pre-killed or anything like that. And some people don't want to see another animal eat another animal. So that's why these guys are number 4, though they are absolutely beautiful and you can absolutely handle them. And they are great pets, in my opinion. This guy was this kind of guy was actually one of my first reptiles as a child. And I remember hanging out with my little corn snake as a kid and wanting to pick up every snake outside because I thought they were all the same. But I do think that they have great personalities. They're active, but not bitey most of the time. If you get them at a very young age, they could be a little finicky with eating, but most of the time when you get one that's well started, they will eat fine for you. And I have done very well with most of my colubrids here, and he is certainly one of my favorites. He's an eye-catching little guy with all of his spots and colorations. And like I said, with palmettos and other corn snakes, you can get different genetics, different genetic combinations, different colors, different patterns. It's very neat. The options are endless with these guys. And there's even milk snakes and king snakes and other colubrids that you can look into if you do like corn snakes. There's other options out there and different color patterns if you want some more variety. Moving on to number 3. Now, this one's not technically a reptile. It's technically an amphibian. It is the PacMan frogs. PacMan frogs are from South Africa, and they could be anywhere from 3 inches to 8 inches, depending on the sex of the animal. They do come in some absolutely beautiful morph and coloration patterns. And I do see them readily available all over Morphmarket as well as at reptile expos all the time. And I find them very interesting because they just kind of sit for the most part. So you don't need a very large enclosure, but you do need to set it up properly for their needs. But you can have an enclosure anywhere from 10 to 20 gallons, and you could feed them what it feels like anything because they're carnivores. So they can feed on insects, they can feed on rodents. It's whatever you really prefer. If you want to give them a mixed diet, it's probably more ideal for them. But they're very neat little creatures and they are handleable. I wouldn't say they're overly handleable, but you can definitely handle them with ease. These guys do tend to live anywhere between 7 to 15 years in captivity, so they are certainly a commitment still. And with any amphibian, you have to be careful with what's on your hands if you are coming in contact with them. So they're more of a very young child look, don't touch kind of situation. But as your child grows up, it may be something that they can work themselves up to, just making sure their hands are very clean and then they can hold them at that point. But they are very cute, very unique, very large, round, big mouthed little creatures. Moving on to number 2. Now, this one has been around for a very long time and is most people's first reptile. We are talking about leopard geckos. The leopard geckos now come in all these extravagant, beautiful morphs and mutations that are beautiful. You can get any colors that you want. You could go anything from dark to bright orange. Stunning animals. And their care is pretty easy. For the most part, you're feeding them dusted crickets, dusted dubia roaches, and that's all they need. Their handleability is very easy. You can definitely handle them as they get older. I would say they're more handleable than some of the younger ones. They're less likely to drop tails. They're less likely to be nippy. And the more you handle them, the calmer they are with being handled. For these guys, they also don't require a crazy enclosure size. The recommended, I would say, is closer to a 40-gallon, but that's even pretty big for these guys. 20-gallon is certainly okay for them, especially in an adult. You might want to go a little bit bigger if they're a big guy. Leopard geckos on average get anywhere between 7 to 10 inches long. So they're not that big of a gecko, but they are sturdy enough and hardy enough that your child can handle them without hurting them. They won't drop their tails, like I said. They don't tend to bite, and they live a pretty decent life. They can live anywhere between 10 to 20 years. And they can live in an enclosure size that's anywhere from a 20-gallon tank to a 40-gallon tank. A 40-gallon tank is maybe if you have more than one together, but they are certainly happy in a 20-gallon long, and they are very easy to take care of with their heat lamps, maybe a heat pad somewhere in there. And they're just a relatively easy animal to keep all around. Moving on to number one. Number one for us would be crested geckos. They are readily available. There is many of them for sale, so you can get anything from a very cheap one to very expensive ones. And with that said, the more expensive ones are going to have very unique patterns, bright colors, and all that, and multiple morphs out there. So you can pick and choose what coloration or morph you like the best. The other thing that is awesome about most New Caledonia species, which crested geckos are, is that they tend to really only eat, I would say, what's called goo or Pangea, something along those lines. So there's no insects involved. You don't have to have insects in your house. You don't have to have rodents in your house. You don't have to have any of that. You basically just have a pack of powder that you reconstitute with some water, stir it up, and put it in their enclosure for them to lap it up. So in that regard, that was exactly what makes them number one, because their enclosure is relatively small. Max size, I would say, needed for one crested gecko is 18 by 18 by 36. And you can have that into a planted enclosure, which most people absolutely love. And they can thrive within there with their little bit of goo in a cup, and you mist them down. They don't require obnoxious heat or any heat at all, depending on the ambient temperature of your home. And they do require some lighting, but no crazy heat bulbs, no crazy expense in those light fixtures. So I do find them to be very unique and very great for a first-time reptile keeper. The nice thing about crested geckos is that they really only get between 5 to 8 inches of length, roughly, depending if they drop their tail or keep their tail. And they live about 15 to 20 years in captivity, so that does make them something that you want to make sure that your kids or you, as a first-time reptile keeper, does understand that they will be with you for a long time. Any reptile that you ever get should be considered something that you're going to have for many years to come. And I think that overall is misunderstood in the reptile world too much. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. In the comments below, let me know if you guys are thinking the same thing for your top 5 and what your first reptile is, because I absolutely love hearing those stories. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.